Three quick questions for you, Nick. Do you think that the federal government's 2030 target is enough?
As in the Morrison government's 2030 target?
You think
no,
27
I don't think
to 20?
it's ambitious. I don't think it is ambitious enough. That's why I was very pleased to see that one of the announcements at the end of the COP26 summit was that there's going to be another COP26 summit next year, because they need to see more ambition from countries like Saudi Arabia, China, Russia, and unfortunately Australia. So I think Australia does need to be more ambitious around 2030.
Yeah, follow-up question. What is the Labor Party's current target for 2030?
Well, the Labor Party is pushing for proper modelling to come out from the Commonwealth. As you know, the Morrison government has sidestepped their own bureaucracy, the Department of Treasury and Finance, and they outsource the modelling. So I think the first thing we need to do is get a firm database to be able to make important decisions.
That'd
like
be before or after the election.
And you do that by doing with Australia's best modellers, and that would be the Commonwealth Treasury.
Right, so you would do that after you presumably won an election?
Well, no, I think they should be asking Treasury to do that work now. As we know, that work that the Morrison government commissioned was flimsy. You know, there's kids doing high school assignments that probably had better modelling in it. And we know that because they released it last Friday, because they were putting it out with the trash, because they know it was trash work.
Yeah. So
they need to take 2030 seriously, get some serious modelling work done by the Commonwealth Treasury, and based on that, we can make a judgment about what Australia needs to do by 2030. But I think,
Bill Shorten at the last one...
agree with me, Paul. We need to do more than what we're currently doing at the moment, and we can't let the National Party, a fringe part of the coalition, hold the whole country to ransom on this stuff. With you see Barnaby Joyce out there saying we're already clear, we're not doing anything more in 2030. Who's running this country? Not Barnaby Joyce and the Nationals.
Yeah, I'll tell you who's funding the country, the resources sector. But how's this? Of course, Bill Shorten had a 45% emissions target for 2030. Do you think it should be higher or lower than that?
Look, I would like us to be more ambitious, but I don't feel like I'm in a position tonight to say on that, Paul. But you know my politics on these things. I lean in very firmly on climate action, and I think we most certainly need to be more ambitious around our 2030 targets, and the 26 to 28% target that we've got at the moment is demonstrably not good enough.
Yeah, small problem here, isn't it, Mark? Where each way Alba, and look, the politics and the media's made its decision, which means he can turn around and shit-can the government for not going hard enough on 2030. People like Nicholas can want them to go harder for 2030, but they don't even have a target for 2030. Instead, no, let's wait till we're in government, Treasury does the modelling, and then we'll take the higher target, just like they magically took a carbon tax to the Australian people after they had voted for it. Now, I get it, a lot of people have got the shits about net zero 2050. But in terms of 2030, what do you think about Labor? Is it smart politics, or is it the beginning of a bit of hubris here that they won't tell us what their plan is for 2030 when they're going to be hired as a government for 3 years between now and 2030?
Well, obviously Labor's not making policy out of the Deputy Mayor's office in Melbourne, and that's probably a relief to everyone. But in terms of what they're doing, it's a target, not the actual cost to the people. Targets come and go, but the real point where the rubber hits the road is what's the average cost to an Australian household of going down this pathway, particularly for people who lose their jobs in resource-intensive industries and manufacturing. So I think it's always the modelling that shows the cost that's more important than something that's a notional target 10, 20 years from now. But, the Australian debate on both sides, whether you've got the technological miracles of the Morrison government or the more conventional approach, coercive approach of the Albanese opposition, the Australian environment on this debate is quite artificial, Paul, because since the Kyoto Protocol in 1997, we don't actually have tangible, real-life emission reductions as such in total. A lot of the Australian data that's regarded as an emission reduction on 2005 is a product of the Australian clause in that Kyoto Protocol, whereby a relatively small number of farmers in New South Wales and Queensland bear the load, that if they don't knock down trees to do their farming and the trees soak up the carbon, that counts as an emission reduction. It's got nothing to do with what happens with industry or emitters as such. It's a tree carbon soaking program where these farmers have been to hell and back with very, very restrictive land clearing laws in New South Wales and Queensland, no compensation for what's happened. And that's a big part of what's regarded as the Australian international effort. So when Scott Morrison said nobody's going to be coerced into this, go talk to those farmers who've copped it now for 24 years, and it gives an artificial underpinning to this Australian debate. Getting rid of all our emissions makes no difference to global temperatures and climate, of course, but the Kyoto Australian clause still bulks large in what's regarded as the Australian effort, and that concentrates the hardship in a particular part of the agricultural sector and makes our consideration of all this very artificial.